The Bachelors of Egypt is a contemporary novel set in Egypt 2011 that covers multiple philosophical topics within its dialogues and incidents. Post the Egyptian Revolution of 2011, politics, economics, philosophy, sociology gained massive interest among members of the middle class and were casually integrated within daily debates and discussions. Among the prominent figures of philosophy, those who tackled sensitive issues at their own times became the most popular in the Egyptian society. Philosophical approaches and views of Socrates, Plato, Machiavelli, Nietzsche were highly consumable. In Chapter 2, Ali Adel, a media student at TUC, was defending his side of an argument by reflecting on Socrates' legacy. At Socrates' trial, he would have been offered a lighter sentence like exile or jail time if he admitted to the crimes that he didn't commit. In his speech, he stated that he doesn't certainly know whether death would be harmful or not, unlike jail or exile, which he was sure of their harm. He chose the unknown instead of choosing a lighter penalty. With our mighty professor, I feel like I'm Socrates, and I have to defend myself when the state's elites have already decided to kill me anyway. Ali Adel, 2011, The Bachelors of Egypt. Socrates' trial scene, as described in the Dialogues of Plato, resembles plenty of less critical situations in our lives. Being judged guilty before a trial begins seems like a redundant incident within different contexts of social interaction. Students like Ali may choose to defy their professor's logic whenever applicable, while other students may simply choose to glorify those professors out of respect, fear, or motivated by a trigger-punishing principle. A hypocritical sense of self-interest. Socrates' legacy, simply stated, the brilliant man never authored a book. He was neither rich nor powerful, but he's definitely a game changer within the scope of philosophy. He used to walk around, gather people, and express his views on multiple existential matters, and they usually found him amusing. Socrates was declared an enemy of state and was judged to death accordingly, which brings up the question, how did his opinion survive if he never published a book? Socrates had many students. Plato was the most remarkable, as he used to challenge and question all views presented by his tutor. When Plato started authoring the Dialogues of Plato, he included his teacher's philosophical approach, along with plenty of his opinions on multiple issues. Unlike Socrates, Plato founded his own academy. He had many students. Aristotle was the most prominent. The man excelled in different fields, impacting both science and philosophy by providing the basis and fundamentals for modern philosophers and scientists across fields. Years later, Aristotle became the teacher of Alexander the Great, the man who ruled most of the world. It's all about a philosophical legacy, an approach, and a set of tactics that survived against tyranny. Socrates, the man who was unfairly sentenced to death by the state's leaders, is the teacher of the teacher of the teacher of the man who led the state to achieve goals beyond imagination. The norm within the Egyptian society, as well as many other places around the world, denotes an inclination to look up to the rich, powerful, successful men as role models, as if wisdom is exclusive to figures like Bill Gates and Steve Jobs. Within a brief era of enlightenment in Egypt, 2011-2012, it was logical for historical figures of distinct beliefs and ideologies, like Socrates, to gain popularity. In other words, their enthusiasts finally had a chance to place their thoughts into multiple contexts and conversations. This same conversation, other conversations within the same book, and plenty of similar real-life situations could be analyzed using Friedrich Nietzsche's philosophical approach toward morality. Who determines morality? Is it all a matter of power? In what could be described as his most controversial book, one of the most controversial authors in the history of philosophy accused past philosophers, including the legends of Greek philosophy, of blindly accepting authoritarian, assertive premises within their societies whenever they had to discuss morality. In the lines of the unorthodox book, he moved forward to destructively criticize the values of truth, self-awareness, free will, which were all held by past philosophers, replacing them all with the will to power. According to Nietzsche, new philosophers should deny the presence of a universal moral code. From Nietzsche's angle, and from that of other philosophers who followed the same approach of beyond good and evil, morality is just a tool used by powerful men to dominate a society and find the legitimate basis to harm less powerful individuals within the society. Parents define morality within a household. Governments define morality within a nation. Priests define morality within a church. If one would agree to consider the will to power as the only motivation for every single action taken by a human being, analysis of incidents like the one mentioned above would become a much easier task. The mighty professor mentioned above utilized his position authority to oppress these students with an apparent will to power. Ali's colleagues' teammates were trying to keep him from defying the professor's logic on every occasion. We can conclude that each of them had self-interest at heart, regardless of their own perceptions of the professor's claims and criticism. In such case, A grades would be considered as the conventional means for these students to showcase their competence to potential employers post-graduation. Based on their own approach, they'll need to please the professor and feed his ego as an easier, more convenient path to gain these grades, when these grades would help them gain postgraduate scholarships or start working for reputable institutions, which will in turn influence their future in terms of financial income, power, and image among members of the society. The link with the will to power could easily be established. Ali might be opposing the professor, defying his logic, and articulately expressing his opinion by reflecting on Socrates' trial, just to dominate his teammates, showcase his leadership skills, and gain some sense of power by challenging the only person in charge of setting a moral code within a lecture hall. With that perspective, even Ali would be motivated by the will to power. Characters aren't judged within the novel. Their opinions, actions, and reactions to different incidents are rather displayed for the reader to reassess and rethink about the main topics covered. From a personal point of view, I generally believe that human beings are complicated creatures with multiple layers that can't all be uncovered at once. If the will to power is the only motivation for all of our actions, we wouldn't have needed psychology, sociology, and a list of other sciences to help understand human behavior. Maybe a single textbook for each of these fields would have adequately displayed the relevance of our single motivation to every possible action, reaction of ours within the most common life situations. One can agree with some of these great philosophers' views on the world and disagree with others. You may spot certain deficiencies, but you can't possibly disregard the presence of logic in their claims, especially when noting how these men used to disagree. Plato continuously disagreed with Socrates while discussing various topics, yet he was considered his prized student, and Plato called him the wisest and justest and best of all men whom I have ever known. Following the same manner, Plato's prized student, Aristotle, disagreed with him on many issues. Nietzsche disagreed with almost everyone, whether alive or dead at his time. Back to personal views. People are the only reason for other people's problems and inconveniences, and are also the main reason for their happiness, inspirations, and joyful moments. It's unfair to classify human beings while placing them into boxes of good and evil. Yet it's illogical to view them all as greedy individuals who only care about possessing power. A few days ago, I've experienced a situation that can't possibly be analyzed with Nietzsche's philosophical approach. On July 29th, Martha Holliday was the first reader to purchase my book on Kobo. She was also the first to post a review on the same platform. She unintentionally reviewed the book as awful on the same night of purchase. She tried to remove it, but the company didn't allow it. On August 4th, she repurchased the book just to post a new review. This is to rectify prior review, which was meant for a different purchase. The company didn't want to delete it, even though I informed them within minutes that I've made a mistake. An interesting take on issues in modern Egypt, very different than UK. Please accept my sincere apology, Martha. She had to repurchase the product and repay accordingly. If she can do that for an indie author that she never met and may never meet, one must believe that there's much more to human beings than just the will to power. The Bachelors of Egypt is available through Amazon and hundreds of other retailers worldwide, but it was removed from Kobo.